Hello, everybody. Anna Sabramowitz here. Thank you so much for joining me. I have a special guest for you today. His name is Don Presant. And you guys, if you're interested in anything badge-related and adult education recognition of prior learning, this is the place to be. So stick around. We're going to get into some awesome details. Thank you, Don, for being here.
My pleasure.
Okay, so now my duty is to read this awesome bio that he's provided and not mess up. If there is no weird Irish names in it, I will not. So let's get to it. So Don Presant is Canada's leading expert on open badge digital credentials. He's a frequent speaker at conferences in Canada, we'll ask him about those, and abroad, and a skilled strategist for the development of assessment and recognition programs. Don is the president of Learning Agents and CanCred.ca, which is a Canadian cloud service for open badges that serves markets in post-secondary and professional education and workforce development. Now, he is working with eCampusOntario, good people over there, and several of its member institutions on a province-wide recognition model using open badges, which is a very ambitious endeavor, but I think they can do it. He co-produced with them the cross-sectoral Ontario Open Badge Forums in November 2017 and March 2019. Don is currently consulting on a large-scale international humanitarian skill recognition project using open badges and several others in Canada. He's a founding member of the International Open Recognition Alliance at openrecognition.org and co-author of the Bologna Open Recognition Declaration. And I think that my Bologna, the way I said it, man, I'm not Italian. Huh?
It's not Irish, it's Italian.
I know. I should look up how to actually say that. Welcome. Thank you so much. This is wonderful. We have tons of questions for you.
Great. Well, thank you. Apologies in advance that March 1st Open Badge Forum, that's where I think I caught my cold. So
okay.
That was just on Friday.
Oh, geez. Okay. That's okay. Well, as long as you give us good info, we will forgive any coughing or any sneezing. Okay. So, how did you get into the online profession? Tell us just your story, and I think why you got interested in this idea of badges and then connecting them to basically real tasks and real experience for adults.
Sure. I began life as a video editor, and I was a video editor at TV Ontario, and I got intrigued by the internet when I was there, and I was also trying to break out of being a video editor. So I proposed a bulletin board system for the organization when they were going through a period of change.
Okay.
And that kind of led to this really heady time for about 2 years where we basically dragged them kicking and screaming onto the internet in 1994, or before it was cool.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So we had this bulletin board system, and it was immediately obsolete because Netscape had just been invented. We said, okay, forget the bulletin board. Let's talk about Netscape. And then we started producing content. They started winning awards, and they've never looked back. So that basically is the education side and the media side and the internet side. I stayed there for a while, ended up with the worst job of my life, being a manager of IT. So I've had a few career changes in my time. So I left TV Ontario in 2000. I went to work with Red River College. So I see actually you're from Winnipeg too, originally. Mm-hmm. And worked with them for a couple of years on continuing education, contract training types of things. And I got involved, when that wound up, got involved in telling career stories because it was like a hot thing. Somebody who used to be at TVO said, people are telling career stories now. So I developed this shtick where it was like Career Destination Manitoba or Destination Carrière Franco Ontario or whatever. So we'd interview people in their jobs, talk about what got them into their jobs, what they liked about their jobs, and made it into this sort of multimedia interactive exploring device. And that was cool for a while. But then I got interested in people telling their own career stories and the notion of e-portfolio, and that's what got me into prior learning, etc. So that was around 2004. I mean, the trouble with e-portfolios is the reason they're valuable is that they're hard to do, right? If you've actually made an e-portfolio, you know so much more about yourself. You know so much more about where you want to go, who you are, etc. The trouble is most of us don't get that far. So it never really took off, but I started going to e-portfolio conferences overseas, and that's still my favorite conference. And then around 2011, I started hearing about open badges. And there's a really interesting story behind that, actually, because the executive director of the Mozilla Foundation, the people who actually invented open badges around 2010, I used to like to say they invented it on the back of a napkin in Barcelona. It's not quite true, but it sounds good.
Sounds cool.
Yeah. But Mark Sermon is the executive director. 25 years before today, back in the early 90s, when I said I was trying to break out of being a video editor, he was helping me produce and direct community cable stories, community cable documentaries. So he was the producer humping the porta-pack and doing the lights when I was interviewing people, and I would edit them and bring them back. So when I heard about open badges and I heard that he was involved, I said, well, they must be good. You know, they might, because I knew he had principles, etc. So I knew it had to be something about read, write, and, you know, expressing yourself and not being just a consumer. So I got involved, and I actually ended up inviting Mozilla across to this ePortfolio conference in 2012. And since then, badges have been growing like a virus on that conference, kind of taking it over. So that's, that's basically what got me here. And then just since then, at that conference again, made a relationship with a Finnish company, now called Open Badge Factory, and set up the CanCred servers here in Canada, partly to be hosted in Canada, but also partly to focus on the Canadian context. And we're their Canadian partner.
It's kind of weird and cool at the same time that it sounds like this is a storytelling piece. Like badges are a way for you to tell your story, and you're kind of a storyteller, and this is like a weird spin-off of that.
It's really interesting because, you know, I was looking at the questions that you were offering, and that, you know, I was trying to come up with some answers, and really it is about story. Badges can actually tell their own story. They carry a story with them. There's how you issue them and how they were issued to you individually, right? There's like the story the generic story, and then there's the specific earning story. Here's how I earned this thing. And sometimes it actually has evidence, direct evidence that relates to how you earned it.
Yeah.
I carry with the badge.
And I want to get into this a little later as well. Is just I think when I initially checked out open badges, I didn't actually realize how intense and robust the badge acquisition process can be. So it's not just this flighty, like you said, you know, here's a stamp. It's actually attached to these real metrics. So that's really cool. And I can show people what that is. Okay. So, and speaking of that, because you are now working in the area of badging with humanitarian, the humanitarian sector, hPass, right?
Right.
And there is a whole bunch of like, badging is the new cool. Everybody wants to get in on this. So tell us more about this, and then this specific initiative, if you want. Just what are some details and challenges around getting humanitarians organized?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, it's a huge sector, right? Depending on how you count them, there are either hundreds of thousands or millions of people directly involved in humanitarian action.
So true.
So, and across different countries, et cetera. And it's been a bit of, what's the word? It's, you know, it's like a cloudy thing. You don't know if the money's always being well spent, et cetera. You have some exceptions, like Doctors Without Borders, it talks about, you know, all our money goes here, et cetera. But in other cases, you don't know what's happening. There's also been this other thing. They have what they call now a localization agenda. And that's based on the fact that humanitarianism was typically done to populations in Africa, in Southeast Asia, et cetera, as opposed to them, you know, helping them help themselves. And so the big funding foundations and the providers came to what they called this grand bargain. And I need to read more about this, my understanding is that that's what led to this localization agenda. So any new initiative has to have a localization story to it, where we are empowering people, enabling people in the host countries to take care of things themselves. So hPass, which began as being called the Humanitarian Passport Initiative, is an incubated agency that should be independent by 2020. It's being incubated by the Humanitarian Leadership Academy in partnership with the steering committee of a lot of other agencies, large and small, that want to use skills and assessment, learning and assessment as a way of professionalizing humanitarian action in the sector. They don't say professionalizing, but that's the subtext around it. So what they've done is they've developed a series of standards. There's standards for humanitarian learning providers, and then I'm not going to get the current title correct, but there's also standards for people who assess people involved in humanitarian action. So competency assessment, right? And so they develop these standards, and they underpin what we do. We invite organizations to come in and badge people for courses that they're taking, badge people for assessments that they're doing, and look at the standards and self-assess themselves against the standards, maybe come up with an improvement plan saying, oh yeah, I guess we don't really do a thorough job of investigating needs before we develop a course, for example. And maybe we should do a better job of that. Then they come up with an improvement plan, and then they may decide, you know what, I think we're pretty good now. I think we're good. We should have a third party come in and look at us. And that's going to be the next phase. Is we've already tested it. We're going to roll this out officially so that people can become hPass approved, and to say that, you know, we meet these standards. We have evidence that says we meet these standards. So it's a form of accreditation that's specific to the humanitarian sector. So, and that's going to be sprinkled through the badges. So you'll be able to see a little sign on the badge if somebody's hPass approved, and it'll be an endorsement inside the badge itself, so that you can search for badges that are hPass approved if you want.
So several questions just came up in my mind. What are the challenges of doing this across countries like that, especially with such a variety of standards and education and access?
Many and diverse.
Wait, that's a cop-out answer.
We're still working. We're still feeling our way around it. One of the things we noticed during the pilot last year was that we had all these standards, and then we had the badges. And so I was brought in to do the badges part, and there had been these teams working up the standards. One of the things I discovered was that the cognitive overload of working up themselves up to the standards meant that they had no, a lot of the pilot organizations didn't have enough spare cycles left to even consider badges, even though badges aren't, you know, it's not rocket surgery. You know, you can start playing with it.
Yeah.
But they were so caught up in the standards fever, hPass approved fever. You know, let's try and see if we can meet these standards. So there's that overload part of it. And, you know, I think in a perfect world, maybe we might have started just badging, and then brought in the standards part way along. Because many organizations may never become hPass approved and still come up with perfectly adequate learning opportunities, assessment opportunities as well.
As far as what do you see as the benefit of, let's say, I'm an international, or no, I'm not an international worker. I work in a country office that gets helped. How does this benefit me? How does this badging process benefit me?
One of the things we're looking at is basically the idea is a skills marketplace. So the ideal is, what if you needed to find somebody who could speak Farsi, understood logistics, and had worked in a high-risk situation before. Those can be encapsulated in badges, and you could potentially find people even passively that way. So they wouldn't necessarily be applying for it. You maybe approach them saying, hey, looks like your background shows that you might be interested in this mission we have. Are you interested? And to have that kind of skills marketplace happening. using the badges as these kind of knowledge objects.
That's really cool. Yeah. It's also interesting because I think that the obviously in areas of more access, you have access to more training, more resources, but all of a sudden now you're putting that experience and these qualifications as almost on an equal level depending on perceived need, and right. So
that's a big theme, actually, and then we're still doing a little too much of the take a course, get a badge.
yes,
But the notion behind it is to recognize that experience on the ground of the so-called national staff, or maybe what do they call them? Internationalized national staff. Sometimes they work in the same region after they've developed their skills in their home country. So typically those skills are really poorly recognized, and that's one of the key missions of hPass, is to find ways of doing a field recognition of skills. And we were just actually talking to, I was just talking to MSF Brussels today about doing that for the, what do they call it? The mobility section of the logistics thing. So the drivers, the mechanics, the technicians, some kind of field recognition. They can do this, they can drive, but they can also do light repairs, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's fantastic. That's to me, it's just because I think if anything, a lot of those people feel like, hey, I'm here and I've done all this stuff. I have all this experience, but there isn't anything official attached to what I do. So that's fantastic. And also, I think that's worldwide. That's a fabulous thing. How many people move jobs and they have all these experience, but they don't have the masters or whatever. And now it can be put on a similar footing.
And a lot of it is the masters you got, maybe that was 10 years ago, and what you did your masters in, have you kept up with it? Who knows?
Yeah, right. I go back to that boring stuff.
So we get into what I like to call recidivist learning, which is you go back to the well every time, every once in a while, and you get topped up with something. And maybe you do it formally, maybe you do it informally, but you get that little extra added skill and it gets added on. So the best example I was using last year, I've used it a little too much, so I've stopped talking about it a lot. But
bring it
IBM,
up, I don't care.
Okay, so IBM, global workforce of in excess of 400,000 people. They're a service-based company. They used to be very much hardware, but as a service-based company, they realized that they really needed to understand design thinking, which is a really hot thing right now, right? So what they did was they set up a family of badges, and they said, this is important to the company. You can take this course here. You can be recognized for it over here. And now they just sit there and watch the badges. And they're able to make what they like to call skills heat maps, which show distribution of badges across their workforce.
Oh, that's cool. It kind of reminds me, a little bit of that Ray Dalio. He wrote 5 Principles, and he said his company uses these, what are they called? He calls them baseball cards. Right, where you have attributes. It's not the same thing, but you have like skills and attributes that they compile on each person to either put them on the right projects, or also it's almost like the amount of, if you are at a meeting making a decision, you can look at somebody's card and then decide how credible their insight is based on their experience. Which is cool, because not everybody's opinion is equally valid or should be equally weighted, right?
Right, exactly. And sometimes the quieter opinion is a better one. So
yeah, exactly. So, but this way, it removes that subjectivity. And I love this idea of that skills heat map, but also a company saying, these are the badges that represent our core, like our wish list almost, right? Like if you want to work here, these are the things that are important to us. I love that. Anyways, go on. Sorry.
A lot of my tagline is often making learning visible. So the idea is, it's pathways you can see, the game mechanics a little bit, but not starting there. But so you can see a pathway, you can try and achieve something, etc. The other, I'll move off IBM, but I just wanted to say another one. I think it's information architect is this position they have that's incredibly hard for them to fill. They have to pay people incredible amounts of money, and they keep on losing them. And
To Google.
yeah, whoever. So what they've come up with now is, what if you could have a composite person based on a couple of people who have pieces of what an information architect could have, because they're all about collaboration. They're all about, working on the same thing at the same time. So that's another idea that they're pursuing. And the only other reason they're into this, and what got them into it in the first place, what lured them into it in the first place, is this whole notion of extended enterprise learning. Getting people to know IBM products and recognizing them for knowing IBM products, and sort of luring them into the fold that way.
I like that idea of compiling people based on skill sets, because then they will learn from each other, but then also you're not so dependent on a single person, right? Like it spreads out that's cool. I really like that. Okay, so we have to get into this, because we have to get into this gamification. So what's the mess up? Because we've had this conversation on a webinar, and you were probably like, I talked about the gamification side, and you were probably like, oh my God.
Well, I knew you were going to, so that was fine. That was fine.
Tell us.
Okay, so gamification. So I guess the way I describe it now, I don't spend a lot of time on it when I present about it, but basically what I say is, where I come from, badges are about recognition. And it's great to reach out into gamification once you've started with recognition. It's a lot tougher to reach into recognition once you've started with gamification.
Oh, I see, yes.
So if you're a course level instructor and you decide to gamify your course, it's a little tough then to say, okay, but these badges are really important. Employers are going to want to see these badges. The other ones were just for fun. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes, I do, because I've applied that strategy, and I know that later it becomes extremely difficult to break the pattern and make them mean something more.
And that's it. And to some extent, maybe it comes from the name, and it comes from, the fact that it's so easy to do at the inside an LMS and link to a course. You can also get them sort of fragmented in LMSs and stuff as, courses are dropped and picked up and things like that. And different instructors take them over. What was I going to say with regard to that? Something really smart.
Although what you said, the idea of standards, there is no standardization on the gamification side, really.
No, you try different things, and there's some gamification stuff really works. So, and I guess what I'm saying is there are elements of game mechanics that are good. The idea of leveling up, the idea of seeing a path that you can follow and knowing how you're doing, the idea of getting that feedback, so when you got the badge, you actually did it.
Yeah.
Those things are really kind of useful. But the idea of competing with other people based on badges, and that turns a lot of people off, for one thing. But the big thing is when the student asks, well, are these good for anything after? And you have to say, no.
Just for funsies.
Yeah, just for fun. So that's the thing. So yeah, I guess the clever thing I was going to say was about language. And so the word badge has sort of baggage to it, and some people push back about that. Their opinions divided. Then people say, oh no, they're not just badges, they're micro credentials. Well, that carries its own baggage, because then you're thinking, oh gosh, they're credit bearing, they're part of a larger credential, et cetera, et cetera. So then actually one of the useful things that's come out of the relationship, many useful things have come out of the relationship with eCampusOntario, but their notion of an alternative credential. What is not being recognized now? What can badges recognize that's not being well recognized now? Mm-hmm. So stuff like graduate learning outcomes, those tenets or program learning outcomes for that matter.
Yeah.
The cross-cutting ones, the ones that keep you hired after your hard skills get you hired.
Yeah. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, also, part of the student experience, let's say in university, is that you do participate in extracurricular activities. A lot of them are things like, leading a student newspaper or some kind of volunteer organization. So is that involved in?
Yeah, that would be co-curricular. So there are a few platforms in Canada that have what they call co-curricular records.
Mm.
And I was asked actually by University of Winnipeg. They said, Don, we're considering getting into a co-curricular record, but isn't that just kind of like an e-portfolio? And I had to say, well, yeah, somewhat. And then I started looking into it, and I realized there's all this effort that goes into this. And what students come away with is a laundry list of what their activities were, and maybe a single one-line reflection on each activity. And that's it. It's typically a paper transcript. So I think it's an interesting idea, very imperfectly implemented. So, but there's signs that actually might change over the next little while. Some acquisitions that are going on out there.
That's the one thing with portfolios that kind of frustrates me. There isn't a beautiful thing, and maybe you've seen stuff over on the other side of the pond that's better. But right now I'm seeing things that are not perfect and also not portable, and also the other challenges you have. We're putting emphasis on portfolios, let's say, in a certain sector, but it doesn't resonate with employers everywhere, right? Like they're like, why do you're not a designer, why do I need to see your portfolio, right?
Yeah, exactly. So actually the prior learning community started talking, they started getting away from portfolios and started talking about targeted evidence packages.
Oh, geez. What's the targeted, what is it?
Targeted, TEP, I guess, targeted evidence packages. So the idea is it's like a little part of your portfolio that you put together for this particular purpose. Right?
I see.
And everything's targeted at that purpose. So
like
you're
a
not talking
cover
about,
letter, let's say.
Yeah, and you can refer to it in your cover letter. But for example, the platform I'm using, I used the technology to apply for my consulting gig with hPass. So I have this little single-page portfolio where I have me, I have a little summary of me. I have some badges that I've earned that relate to adult learning. I have a video of me doing a keynote at Waterloo about badges, showing, that at least they asked me there. And then I have my CV at the bottom. So a little single one-page brochure. What do you think? It's targeted at this gig I'm applying to you for. So that, to me, would be a good example of a targeted evidence package that an employer might be interested in, right?
That's very cool. I like that. That's more focused, because it seems to me that the portfolio thing was just like a giant dump of stuff, and everybody had to do their own deconstruction or translation of what something means. And I've certainly been sent portfolios where people are like, "Here's me," and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not wading through all this stuff."
Yeah.
Right?
And it's all the portfolios for learning versus showcase portfolios, right? So a lot of them work them up in academe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's they don't always shift gears very well.
No. So okay, potential for badges. What do you see? What's your big vision? 10 years, 20 years? What's your?
I'm starting to think of them as digital credentials. So they can be big or small. They don't have to be a micro credential. They can be a nano credential. They can be a mega credential, a meso credential, whatever. So, for example, we have some Italian universities who are publishing badges as proxies for master's degrees. Why? Because they want to tell a better story than what would be in the transcript. So you click on the badge and you find out about the program. And so especially for small universities, without as much brand recognition, they're at least putting their story better out there. WES is starting to use badges. They're starting to publish badges as an optional service, so World Education Service, for their credential reports. So if you're an immigrant, you have a credential from India, somebody says, I don't know if this is any good, you send it to WES, they send you the report, and they actually have a badge now that can come with the report. And so in other words, you don't have to get it done over and over again. You can have this thing that's maybe even on your LinkedIn profile.
Oh my God, I love that.
Yeah.
My mom would have loved that because that's one of the things like I don't know if you've, I'm an immigrant, right? So I always talk to people the same stories, and I'm always like getting driven in a cab by somebody who's a doctor. And I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And he's like, I can't get they don't recognize what I did. And it's such a long process. And I'm just like, my God, we are wasting away this man and woman. Yeah. I had so many like of my mom's friends who were coming through, lawyers, doctors, and we'd hang out and they'd be like, yeah, cleaning job, just because there's no recognition of that. That's such a cool, love that.
Well, they did it for you kids. They did it for you kids. So you today, you can thank them for putting up with that because they did it for you, right?
Yeah, right? That's cool.
Yeah. So, so there's that, as I say, IBM's jumping all over it. The Fortune 100s are now, so IBM is on it. Microsoft has already overtaken IBM in terms of total badges issued. Who's the latest? EY, Ernst & Young, SAP recently jumped on it. Yeah.
International companies, right?
Yeah, really huge companies. So they'll help put the word out there.
Yeah.
Where I think the future is for two kinds of skills. They're what they call T-shaped skills. So you have the domain skills you got to go back and get your programming in JavaScript, because it's really hot right now. Actually, it isn't, but imagine
Ruby on Rails or something.
Ruby on Rails, yeah. So, but then do I also have this cross-cutting skill? Can I show I've worked in teams? Do I have experience that shows I've worked on teams? So communities based on badges and ecosystems of badges and them sort of flowing back and forth. Right now, up to now, mostly it's been all about issuing the badges, sticking them on LinkedIn, and they kind of just sit there. So if somebody looks at them on LinkedIn, LinkedIn's not even really using them right.
Yeah.
Because you have to actually scrape the content into a LinkedIn certification. It's really silly the way it is right now for all platforms. But where it's moving is this notion of you can find me by my badges. Think of an internet of badge things.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So that's I think where it's going, and they can be any size, and you just have to be clear about what the size is, what the rigor is, how it maps to a framework, a skills framework, or a qualifications framework in terms of complexity. Just be really clear about that, and that's actually one of the reasons we're really excited to be working with eCampusOntario, because they get that, and they actually have a dedicated hub that they call the eCampusOntario Passport, where badges are now going with their participating member organizations, and that they want to become this sort of cross-sectoral recognition hub using badges. So it could be professional organization, could be an industry sector organization, could even be government workers and things like that.
That's really cool. This idea of that we're gathering all this data, and finally somebody's going to start reading the data to use it to their advantage, like employers, right? Looking at badges as an asset. But I think one of the things that I found that's maybe more conducive to the uptake is, as an individual user, how much additional effort it takes for me to gather the badges and make sure I get them. Like I found on the Kaya platform, they have integrated it into their a lot of their back-end courses, right? So do you earn a badge, and it's actually attached, it's automatic, right? It's like, here it is if you want a certificate, here it is if you want the badge, here's all the things that you can do to achieve it. So it's baked into the system, and I love that. I think that's going to be.
Yeah, there's another one, there's PHAP, Professionals for Humanitarian Assistance and Protection, and they're going the micro-certification route. So they have these psychometric exams that you take. They're invigilated online psychometric exams, typically 60 questions, and you choose one of 4 answers, and if you get, I think it's 70%, you get the micro certification, which could be understanding humanitarian ecosystems, could be cash transfer programming. They're starting to work them up and starting to map them to the core humanitarian competency framework that's out there.
Yes. Yeah. Very cool.
Uh-huh.
So it's kind of like an IQ test for Humanitarian.
Yeah, well, I mean, you cram for it, so they'll give you resources.
Oh, really? Okay.
They'll give you resources. Here's what you should know. Read this and read this and read this. Okay, now take the exam. Oh, you didn't get it this time. Okay, well, wait for 60 days and take it again.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's good. I mean, like we said, it's just, there's a way for people to actually get some sort of recognition for their learning without spending thousands upon thousands to get sort of a formal something.
One of the things we're working on in the humanitarian sector is applied learning. So take the course, get the the learning badge, but then have another one applied in the workforce where the manager observes you applying that in action and provides that sort of, what is that, Kirkpatrick 3, something like that. So in other words, you've applied it in the workplace. You've seen the benefit in the workplace. The only issue with that is making sure the managers know how to assess that.
That's true. That's true. But the idea of portability, taking your skills with you, even if the job is gone, especially with humanitarian projects, it's like gone, right? It's project-based, and then you just, so now you have this, you're like, but this is mine. I've earned this. This is my piece. Right. I can take it with me. Yeah, it's fabulous.
There was one that I was brainstorming early on when I sort of coming up with these ideas back in 2015. The idea was, what if you had a Haiti 2010 badge? Would you have to say anything else?
Well, kind of. You could have been like the guy, just, I don't know, like.
Well, that's true. Okay, there could be a story in the badge.
I handed out the cups of water.
I did the missing maps part. Yeah, yeah. Right.
Yeah. So yeah, that's, but you're right. It could be attached to events, right?
It's like a service medal idea, right? So
yes, and carries its own weight, and I think that's fantastic. So okay, and I think we talked about so what are some misconceptions around badges or badging that you hear a lot of people bring up, and they're like, oh yeah, what about this?
Well, I was thinking about that, and I was thinking that, are they misconceptions, or are they just examples of bad practice?
Good question.
I like to say it's easy to do badges badly. So if they say that they're just silly gimmies, well, that's if you're using the silly gimmies, right? If they say they lack rigor, well, that's because you don't have rigor in your badge. If they say there's a little too much worry about them being fraudulent, because you can verify, the badge issuer on the platform. There are other methods for signing and counter-signing. They are talking about adding blockchain as an option for the badge to, sort of validate provenance of the badge and the fact that it was issued at such and such a time, et cetera. But I think people worry a bit too much about that, just as they're looking at these things. A lot of what people, I think, talk about badges is badges are transparent. I like to say they're lenses on learning, because they tell you about what the experience was, what the criteria were, what the assessment was, how portable they are. Like, in other words, have you worked out a way in which this organization over here will recognize your badge? Have you done that work? Or have you just issued the badge and hoped that somebody was going to do it? And then all the way down to analytics. I'd like to call badges as outcomes analytics, learning outcomes analytics, because it's like that IBM example. So if they complain about those things, they're basically potentially talking about bad badges. And what I would say in return is, how many bad courses are out there that aren't as transparent about how bad they are?
Yeah.
So in other words, it's easy, quickly you can find out whether a badge is worth it or not.
Yes.
And the other part that's coming on is endorsement. So remember I was talking about that hPass approved?
Yes.
So that's a very formal form of endorsement. But endorsement could be something like another organization that issues the same badge. Hi, we issue the same badge, we cross-endorse each other.
Yes.
Or I'm an employer, these badges are interesting to us. We like these badges. They'll change the experience of the person who comes to be recruited by us.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So from informal to formal, there are ways of building that trust. And I think a lot of it comes from people who just haven't done it.
Or experienced it, right?
Exactly. They haven't earned a badge. There's been a lot of sort of, I think, talking around tables.
Yes. Oh, God.
Imagining what it would be.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. Instead of actually going through the rigor of maybe, you should actually earn one and see what it's like.
Yeah,
And then
or
you
even
get,
play in a sandbox and issue one. That's actually one of the things that eCampusOntario did was, we'll set up these accounts. You folks play with them internally, try some things out, experiment, and come back to us with what you found out.
but there are frameworks already in place that you could leverage as a new user, right? You don't have to come up most with anything really, right?
Sure. Yeah, basically what we're doing actually right now in hPass is a combination of things. One of them is if somebody comes on, and I was just doing this with MSF Brussels. New person came on, I invited him to the account, and I sent him the Badging Fundamentals Workbook. And basically it's a 10-step process. You sign on, you look at your organization details, you issue yourself a silly little badge, you earn a badge over here, you maybe make a little badge pathway ending in a milestone. Just silly badges, no content to them, but actually pressing buttons and moving levers and seeing in a hands-on kind of way what the affordances of the system are. And if you're any kind of a creative instructional designer, this is going to start giving you ideas on how you can use these kinds of things when you want to apply them to your learning programs or your recognition programs.
I think the idea that you're saying here is also once you see the rigor that is applied to a badge, it will trickle back into your next learning design, regardless of whether it's badge attached or not, right?
Right. And rigor, and I'm just going to pick up on that one word. Rigor is a word we hear a lot from people who are pushing back somewhat.
Yeah.
So rigor, I think quality and rigor should be appropriate to context.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Fitness for purpose, right? So it's not a binary thing. So
yeah.
So one of the things we advise people to do in early days of doing badges is start with something small. Start with something, say maybe it's staff development or faculty development or Con Ed, something that you're already sort of partway there. And if it doesn't work, nobody cares.
Yeah.
And then you try your idea out because you're going to go through a few thresholds of learning. You know what I mean? About what a badge is. There's a threshold you go through when you apply for your first badge and you reflect and you actually get the badge. And you're kind of proud of yourself and realizing, oh, wait a minute, that's my memory there. I have a little chunk of my memory that's being externalized. So it's so there's things like that are really interesting to go through. And if you do things in a small, sort of agile, incremental kind of a way, you're going to tend to be more successful over time.
So as far as if we're talking about, you talked about MSF Brussels getting started and you send them this little kit basically to get them going. So but if somebody wants to say, thinks this is a great idea, they want to get started, you said start small, but how do I really start to introduce this into my organization?
Well, I have to put things in terms of the context of CanCred, okay? Because that's how I think.
Yes.
Basically, you can get set up with 60 days, try it for free at kind of like the medium level, which is premium. So you have 60 days to set up your account, make a badge. We can give you, basically text you would populate your badges with, etc. We're thinking of even having badges you can just sort of copy as a starting point.
Yeah.
Just play with them. Issue them to yourself. Start issuing them to your friends. Start playing with, work with, say, that badging fundamentals thing. And then think of a really low risk project that you might want to do along the lines of what I mentioned. So it could be something related to an event, maybe a learning event, and you ask people to reflect. We just ran the Ontario Open Badge Forum. We had 110 people show up. And we just hit 30% in terms of people applying for a reflector badge. And we basically said, what did you learn? And how might you apply that in your workplace? And getting lots of great answers, much better than smiley sheets.
Yes. Oh gosh, yeah. That's very cool.
Yeah, so something like that. It's just a way of getting started. And just to say that if you decide that for whatever reason that's not for you, you can flip back to free, which gives you fewer badges, or you can even shut your account down. Any badges that you've issued will guarantee for at least 2 years, and they have no reason to shut them down. They don't really carry much load. So that's, and there are other platforms, and some people are exploring the other platforms, and you can do that as well. I do have my rant about badges inside learning management systems. I typically pick on Moodle when I talk about that, but some of the things are true of other learning management systems in terms of that potential fragmentation, sort of Wild West kind of a thing in terms of badges, as opposed to like a centralized strategy. I mean, that's what you're trying to come up with, is a strategy that is branded for you. It's based on whatever level of rigor you figure is appropriate, and it's a statement of your organization, and you can't really get that at the sort of course level badge kind of thing.
I like this idea, and I think that it will take a little bit of, I don't know if the newer generations are more used to digital badges or seeing a visual representation, or actually being actively involved in capturing their skill sets. Like I'd work with some of my, my elderly friends, and when they were moving jobs, and I'd be like, okay, so what have you done in the past 10 years? And they're like, well, lots of stuff. But the culture of capturing your learning and seeing that as something that you do, instead of your employer recognizing you every year saying, Jim, you did it,
Right. Yeah, it's not there. I think the easy places right now for early traction are things involving IT. So that IT hard skill stuff. So Humber is jumping all over that at the moment in terms of hard IT-based skills. But also young people who are trying to make a name for themselves. They're trying to get to the interview. Basically, we like to say badges might get you to the interview. They won't get you the job.
Just get it in the door.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's up to you. So, and make sure you, read your portfolio before you go into the interview.
What did I do?
Yeah, exactly. Tell me about yourself. So young people trying to make a name for themselves, so there's a lot of sort of the fundamentals. I've shown engagement in this area. So Kaya is a great example of that. People want to get into the humanitarian sector. They'll take a bunch of those courses, and they're just embedded assessments in those courses, right? They're nothing high rigor.
Yeah.
But if they take enough of them, they're actually showing quite a bit of engagement there, So
and like initiative, which to me is like 90% of the game.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's people starting out. I think it's probably tougher with boomers and Gen Xers to do the same thing. That's kind of an observation anyway, really. Yeah. So I would say it's more on the younger side of the population, less on the older side of the population. And IT that's where a lot of the buzz is. So that's where EY is doing it. That's where IBM, Microsoft, it's those keywords, that come up in LinkedIn skills survey and things like that, right?
Yeah.
But where I think a lot of the interesting stuff is in the soft skills. So what people sometimes call the 21st century skills, etc. Will this person be a team player? Well, what demonstrates to me that this person may be a team player?
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's just getting at that, and there's been a couple of people doing it. So the Education Design Lab is doing some interesting work with a number of post-secondaries and now employers, what they call teeing up the skills. And then also down in the States again, Corporation for Skilled Workforce is doing some really interesting work with something they call Connecting Credentials, which is like a Lumina-funded project, where basically it's taking what kind of might be the EQF. It's kind of like a mashup of the EQF, the European Qualifications Framework, where they talk about domain knowledge, but then they talk about interpersonal skills, intrapersonal skills, and levels of sophistication. And then they talk about what elements of those would be in a particular job role. And the big work, the heavy lifting, is mapping those things properly to particular job roles. It might be, say, customer sales rep in a retail store versus, management over here in a I don't know, high tech industry, something like that.
Although that sounds like some really interesting work to be doing, to be doing that kind of mapping.
Oh yeah, it's a ton of fun. I'm dying to get the CSW people up here. I was talking with them when I was down in Phoenix at the IMS Global. That's where the standard, the Open Badges standard is managed right now with IMS Global, and they run these meetings. So I was down there for the Digital Credentials Summit, and the fellow who was running that, I'm hoping to get him up to have him speak in Hamilton with Mohawk College that we're working with, because they're working very much on a sort of underserved populations, youth at risk, et cetera, and just finding ways of mapping those skills and talking about these are the employability skills, and these are what demonstrate them, and these are how they play out in the job. The employers themselves lack that vocabulary. Yes.
Oh, totally. You can see they just copy and paste job descriptions without really knowing. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to switch gears a bit here, okay, because as a professional, you've had a long career and you go all over the place. So the people that, I talk to a lot of professionals who are very skilled and have a lot of experience, but they are not confident. So getting in front of crowds, selling their ideas even to like a department is very hard, especially in learning design. So what strategies do you suggest for building confidence as a professional?
It's interesting.
Why?
I'm an introvert. I am an introvert. But I was thinking about this, and I was thinking that although I'm not a hockey fan, I do follow the Jets a little bit, and their slogan is "Fueled by Passion." So that's what actually drives me. If I'm passionate about something, as you can tell, I'm passionate about recognition and how it plays out in portfolios and digital credentials. If I think it's the right thing, then it's not about me. It's about the thing, right? So when I stand up there, I'm talking about the thing. Now, I still stutter sometimes, and I still say, probably too much. But one of the things, I told this to somebody else, actually, I was working with in the Manitoba government, who had to actually do public speaking. And I said, here's a trick. When you get up there, start with a little self-deprecating joke about yourself. Just a little one. So, and then you can just climb from there. And then what you've done, you've already made fun of yourself. So now you got nowhere to go but up. And you can build yourself up from there. That's your base. Right?
I love it. Yeah. It's actually funny because there's a pastor that preaches his Joel Osteen, and he always says, I like to start with something funny. And I think that he does that because it just takes the edge off, right? It's like, yeah, I like it. So that's a good tip.
So mine was ePortfolios, and I said, it's a very sad story, but my honeymoon was at an ePortfolio conference. So, and I said, but it was in La Rochelle, and so the food was amazing, the people were great, and so I'm still married. We even managed to reproduce. So there you go.
That's so bad.
Yeah. And what she did was when she went to do her thing, she just put up a picture of her kid, and she said, "That's my son." And then she just looked at it for a while, and then she moved on. That was her thing.
Hey, that's lovely. That's pretty awesome, and personalizes the experience too. That's great. And so, what do you think? And I mean, it's funny you started out as in the film industry, which is probably where you met some MSF people, right? Currently now MSF people.
Yes, actually, the certain person you may have interviewed in the recent past.
Yeah. So you've seen probably as a result of, I'm assuming as a result of all this badging intervention and online learning, you've seen adult learning a lot. So when you reflect on that, what takes adult learning for you to the next level? Things that you're like, yeah, that was awesome.
I think what it is, and we've been sort of touching on it here, is the idea of take a course, get a badge. That to me is not really exciting. That's maybe a place to start, but it's taking charge of your own learning, and setting your own path, and maybe mapping your learning to destinations that you want to go to, and then getting people to recognize that you're actually getting there. Right? Is that kind of, and again, just I keep on mentioning the same word over and over again, recognition. But I mentioned we ran this Ontario Open Badge Forum, and one of the speakers actually didn't appear, but he made a video clip, and he's from the Scottish Social Services Council, which is a workforce of about 200,000 people. And typically, they often kind of back into the sector. They're taking care of a parent or whatever, and they just start doing it professionally, and so they typically haven't been schooled in how to be a professional.
Oh, okay.
So they're a regulatory body and a sector association, and so they were trying to come up with better ways of professionalizing the sector. And what they've come up with is a badging system based on reflections and based on human evaluation of reflections. So they'll have, you can go to an event, and you can apply for a badge and get the bronze badge. I don't really like the way you use bronze, silver, and gold, but if they actually reflect on the event, they would get a silver badge. And then if they actually show how they used what they learned in their workplace, they get the gold badge. And what they're saying to these people is, take charge of your learning. Don't just be a passive consumer. And understand that your reflections are valuable in and of themselves to you and to other people in the community. So actually what they're trying to do now is retrofit all these badges into portfolios.
Yes, good luck with, sorry, that's an evil project.
So I don't know how they'll do, but they've done a really interesting job. Thousands of badges, reviewed by humans, and they're trying to come up with ways of scaling that better. But the whole story behind that is that people running their own learning, forging their own path based on their context, but aligned to standards because they are a regulatory body.
So that, as far as, I love that you said it's autonomy, right? Do you need to get that?
No.
So the autonomy aspect, so it is a bit of a culture shift, but I agree with you when you, like the whole idea of forging your own path and other people recognizing that path as well. That's super cool. And I don't think you even have to speak of specific examples, but just the idea of that path, choosing it for yourself.
The problem with lifelong learning in general, I think, is that in fact it's so amorphous, right? So for me, what badges have the potential to bring in is like these sort of rocks you would put in an embankment by the side of a road, where they provide a little bit of structure, and with your experience around like the dirt around the rocks, right? Yes. So that's my metaphor for the day.
You're done.
Take your own, take your own path, but get recognized and have these little sort of nuggets that provide a little bit of structure to what you've got and give people an idea of what you're about.
I like that. Okay. Your favorite resource for personal learning now?
I'm playing with LinkedIn Learning right now. Those videos are very nice.
They're very nice.
Yeah. The reason I'm doing it, to be honest, is to see how easy the credentials are to accept, because I want to compare that to the Open Badges experience. Really easy? Okay. So there you go. That's my point. So I invited LinkedIn to... That's right. And that's it, right? So it'd be great if those were combined with ways of applying that learning, etc. So, but for me, really, the way to learn is to actually do things and to learn as I go. And often it's, the Google or DuckDuckGo the answer if I don't want to be an information product at the same time. And applied learning on the go. Reflection is good also. But yeah, I haven't really taken too many formal courses that I've actually stuck around to the end of.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Adult, I wouldn't say.
Yeah, it's funny because people talk about like, oh, MOOCs have a stick rate of, 25% or less. And I'm like, yeah, it's because we consume what we want and then we go away.
Right.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's no incentive to stay, and there's also most times, but also it's just how is it valuable to me, right? And if I have limited time, I might just like check it out and then.
And partly you get the experience as a kind of like a, well, I hate to use the word, but gestalt, you know what I mean? Like the whole feeling of it, you kind of
Yes.
get it from a few sessions and then, okay, that's enough. I'll move on now.
Yeah, that's true. Still, I don't need to contribute to all these discussion forums.
Right.
So you go all over the world, like all over the world, and have to take a ton of probably disgusting antibiotics to be able to travel.
Oh, you scared the heck out of me when you talked about how sick you were from your, what is it, anti-malarial?
Yeah,
Yeah. I was fine though.
you
I
were
went to
fine.
Rwanda. That was
Oh,
my first visit to sub-Saharan Africa. I was
yeah,
very impressed.
cool. No, it's yeah. That was the only negative thing. Everything else was really cool and amazing, and really good. Um, really good to reflect on different cultural perspectives, and it's awesome. So what's your favorite conference that you like go to every year that you're like, this is it, I can't miss this?
My honeymoon conference. It's the ePortfolio conference that I started going to in 2004. I have to say that because I helped program it. So it's
You have to say that.
yeah. Well, I helped make it, right?
Yeah.
So that said, the Ontario Open Badge Forum. I really enjoy putting that on. And actually, we're looking for opportunities to run that model in different parts of the country. So if anybody's interested, basically we would partner. I've done it in BC. I've partnered with a post-secondary there. In Ontario, we partner with eCampusOntario. We're starting to make noises about doing something in the Maritimes,
Yeah.
and possibly Calgary. But yeah, so if anybody's interested in it, I love putting on a show like that. Can I just talk about what that show is?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Because again, it's something I program. So it's kind of like a cross between an Igniter conversation cafe and a pop-up design lab.
Ooh,
So we'll
okay, I
have
already love it. I want to go. Can you
well,
come down to the island?
yeah. Well, you missed it on Friday. You missed it on Friday in Toronto. It's at the Globe and Mail Center. Just a gorgeous location and very inspiring. So basically, we'll have like 5 or 6 people talk 5 minutes at a time, just with slides or not, and then basically have a breakout. And they end their speech saying, "Here's what we're doing."
Mhm.
They'll end their speech with a thing saying either how do we make our open badges initiative better, or how do we make our initiative better with open badges.
Okay.
Some people haven't really started yet. They're just sort of looking at it. So then we have these breakouts. So then you have tables of 6 to 8 people, and we have these design badge canvas design things, and they start working up to who's the audience and what are the criteria, what are the skills that you're doing. And there's no obligation to do anything with this, and you only do it for 45 minutes, but then you stop and then you rinse and repeat, right? So then you're up with the next sector.
Oh,
It started out with workplace, and then we went for youth and community, and then we ended up in post-secondary. So we
love
did
it.
that kind of 3 times during the day.
Okay, I gotta attend next time it's anywhere around here. Or just make sure that you can organize it close to my house.
There you go.
I'll
Yeah.
reach out to some people, be like, watch this part of the video. When are you putting it on? That's awesome. Yeah, I'm sure we could get something going because there is like UBC, I feel is like, I'm not biased or anything, but I think they're really progressive, and their engagement with the work sector and business sector is always been strong, and it's even getting stronger. So
Great.
that would
Okay.
be awesome.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we did our thing with Quantman, and they probably want to be involved again. So yeah, maybe we've got something to work with.
Cool. All right. That was good. Okay. So you're all right. So the 2 conferences you did mention really are just the ones you organized.
Yeah.
I would
So,
want to show up at those 2. I agree. That's cool.
yeah, I'm just trying to think of other ones. Yeah, I went to one here in Winnipeg that I just wondered why I was there. It was just like total showbiz. It was all about disrupting education. And I just didn't understand because it was people talking at you. For me, it's all about being interactive, committing yourself in words at least, possibly on paper.
Yeah.
And then maybe you might do something coming out of that conference. It might change your behavior.
That's cool. And I mean, I'm sorry, but that is not commonplace in most conferences, and I've been to many. You just basically, you're getting a goodie bag with a bunch of sticky notes that are branded. You just go there for stationery.
Have you ever sat through 2 panel discussions in a row?
No.
Oh, it's awful. I did that the day before the Thursday last week in Montreal at another conference, and I said, "Oh, this is what I won't do." So.
Yeah. And then lunch sucks, and then you're like, "This is it. That's it. I'm never coming back.
I'm out of here." Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so 2 last questions. What was the one of the best or most impactful lessons that you've learned over your career?
I guess that it's about the story. It's about telling a story, and it's about being part of a story. So when I've talked about the passion, I'm part of a story, okay? So I'm part of a story that's in the process of becoming. And when I'm smart, I tell stories. So that I told a story when I introduced Mark Sermon, when he was helping me, at the Portapack producer, and that just encapsulated it for people, right? So I think when I'm at my worst is when I'm being preachy and overly analytical and et cetera. And when I'm at my best, I'm telling a story and living it.
It's so funny because I know that you put these answers right in the document. I hadn't seen that before when I read your bio, and then you started talking about your passion. The story thing was like, I picked up on it right away. And it's kind of funny because it's like, it's your ethos now. That's great. I love it. That's really cool. And kind of, I don't know, it's like ghosts, shivers. Okay. That's awesome. Okay.
Well, then I saw your LinkedIn profile after, and I thought, oh boy, she's all about stories. I was going to think I'm stalking her or something.
No, I am all about stories. I think you gotta, it's like our mind is used to a narrative. That's how we make sense of things. And so to get away from that is to deny yourself, I think, greater understanding. So, yeah. Okay. So you've told us about the conferences. I want to put the links underneath the video, but if somebody wants to get in touch or learn more about your work or learn how to get involved in some of the things that you're doing, what should they do?
Well, I'm probably most active on Twitter. So at Don Presant on Twitter. And don@learningagents.ca, and then you can do the CanCred.ca and start poking around there. We're about to make it to full bilingual status. The platforms are already bilingual, and the website is about to go bilingual. I got a little distracted with the open badges for last week. So that'll be happening soon.
Awesome. Fabulous. That is so important as far as like languages and accessibility in different languages. So huge, especially now that you're in this humanitarian world. You understand that as well, right? That's another hurdle. Yeah.
That's actually one thing I haven't had a chance to implement here, and I don't know if anybody has any ideas, but we even can support Indigenous languages in the badges. That's part of the library. So we have Cree, Ojibwe, and Inuktitut that I've identified so far.
That's fabulous. Mohawk should be next. There's actually a huge, Ontario has a huge initiative on that language as well. So that's four additional language. That is so cool. Okay. And they have really, the writing is, anyways, that's whole nother conversation as far as I'm concerned.
Exactly. Actually, it was interesting because at the Montreal conference, we had a prayer from a Mohawk person from Nanawake. So, yeah. And it sounded different. The language was noticeably different from what I normally hear here in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Really
cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this time. This was fantastic.